Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming to today's event. Georgetown University is committed to standards promoting speech and expression that foster the exchange of ideas and opinions. While it is recognized that not everyone may share the same views as the speaker, it is expected that everyone in attendance at this event respect the right of the speaker and the Institute of Politics and Public Service to share their views and ideas by not causing a disruption to the event's activities. As with all of our events, there will be a question and answer session during which you may ask questions and engage in dialogue. Please be sure to phrase your comments in the form of a question, and in the interest of time, we ask that each person be concise and ask only one question. In a moment, I'll be glad to welcome Sydney Freed to the podium. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Sydney Freed, and I'm a senior in the School of Foreign Service from Jacksonville, Florida. I've been involved with the Institute of Politics and Public Service since my first year at Georgetown, and this year I've served as the Fellows Co-Chair on the GU Politics Student Advisory Board. As a fellow Floridian, I have long admired Ambassador Waltz for his commitment to faith, service, and a deep love of our country. Even more, I respect the integrity and courage he's maintained throughout his career in public service. It is my honor to introduce him as tonight's speaker. Mike Waltz currently serves as the United States Ambassador to the United Nations and previously served as National Security Advisor to the President, helping shape U.S. foreign policy and strategy at the highest levels of government. Prior to this, he represented Florida's 6th Congressional District in the U.S. House of Representatives, where he quickly emerged as a leading voice on defense and national security. In 2018, he became the first Green Beret elected to Congress, serving on the House Armed Services Committee, the Foreign Affairs Committee, and the Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence. Prior to public office, Ambassador Waltz spent over 2 decades in the U.S. Army and National Guard, completing multiple combat deployments to Afghanistan, the Middle East, and Africa, earning 4 Bronze Stars. He later served as policy advisor at the Pentagon and the White House and worked in the private sector on defense and security strategy. This evening, he'll be in conversation with Mo Elleithee, the executive director at GU Politics. Ambassador Waltz will take questions from students after their conversation. Remember to join the conversation on social media by tagging @GU Politics. Please join me in welcoming to the stage Mo Elleithee and Ambassador Mike Waltz.
Hoya Saxa, everyone. I am more than impressed to see so many of you here on this first 80-degree day of the season. Yeah. So thank you all. And Sydney, thank you for your introduction and for your leadership throughout your 4 years at Georgetown. Ambassador, I got to tell you, I'm a proud alum of Georgetown School of Foreign Service. When 30-some years ago, when I was sitting where they were, I always wanted to be sitting where you are. Model UN defined my college experience for me, and I thought being the U.S. ambassador to the UN would just be the coolest job in the world. So I'm thrilled to actually have the opportunity to talk with you about that. We're going to talk amongst ourselves for about 30 minutes or so, and then we're going to invite all of you into the conversation as well. And I do want to dive into the UN pretty quickly, but before we do that, let's take a step back and talk about the worldview that informs how you approach your job every day. The president has talked about the Monroe Doctrine, and the national security strategy lays out a Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. Obviously, the Monroe Doctrine back in the day focused very much on the Western Hemisphere, but we're seeing quite a bit of engagement elsewhere around the world. So I'm hoping you can help us understand the organizing principle, the principle that actually, again, informs everything that you do every day. What is the Monroe Doctrine? What is the president's approach to foreign policy? And how does it extend beyond the Western Hemisphere?
Great question. Good to be with you all. I am not an alum, but my amazing wife, Dr. Julia Neshawat, who's here with us is, and I just have nothing but respect and admiration. I've worked with foreign service officers in particular, many of who come from the School of Foreign Service, and out in the hinterlands of Africa and Afghanistan and the Middle East as a special forces officer, and now, of course, to have so many on our great team up at the U.S. mission at the UN. And I've got to tell you, whenever you're in a car accident overseas, or you have a visa problem, or you're stuck somewhere, or you just need to go talk to a fellow American, we just had dear friends who had a relative die overseas, unfortunately, and couldn't, to show up at that United States of America in your moment of need, and to have a foreign service officer really step up and help you is something we should never take for granted. One. Two, I'll get your question in a minute, but I just want to get these two things out. I, too, was sitting out there, and I came through here, actually, and did the Model UN. Who would have thunk 30 years later? But I was the UAE. I was the, everybody gets assigned a country. I was the United Arab Emirates. Never in 10 million, 100 million years did I think I would find myself as a Green Beret embedded in a UAE Special Operations Task Force. 3 Americans, me and 2 others, 90 Arabs, partnered with 180 Afghans out in the mountains of Afghanistan. Closest I'll get to Lawrence of Arabia in ever. And if I never eat goat again, that's okay, because we literally lived off the land. But then fast forward again that, I spent all of last week working with the Emirati, the UAE's foreign minister, negotiating a UN resolution. So you never know where you're going to end up, and don't ever sell yourself short. And I look forward to seeing one of you in this chair, and I'll be watching from fishing down in Florida. But a few decades from now, to answer your question on dumb row doctrine, there's a number of ways to kind of lay that out, but I'll just approach it from this perspective. One of the many lessons I think we should learn from COVID was things that we take for granted in our everyday lives, things that literally cost pennies, fractions of pennies each, like mask, gowns, and gloves. Suddenly, when we have a supply chain shortage, when we can't get them anymore, when we all take for granted that we just show up at CVS and get the drugs we need, or that our hospitals are fully stocked, or that we have all the computer chips to go into our phones, how critical supply chains are to our entire way of life. One lesson from COVID. Number 2, we can't have an over-dependency on any one country, much less one who is our stated adversary, the People's Republic of China. And then number 3, in the Western Hemisphere, I think we've just, in multiple administrations, both sides of the aisle, our policy has suffered from just a lack of attention. The multiple wars in the Middle East over the years, of course, the Cold War competition with the Soviet Union. We are seeing the competition with the People's Republic of China play out in the Western Hemisphere. Very much so. And I'd say, just from a broader sense, we have the energy, the critical minerals, the food security. We could go down the list right here in our Western Hemisphere, where we can have those relationships, have those trade relationships, but also secure it in a way that ensures our economic independence. And that's from the Arctic, that Julia knows as a former Arctic commissioner very well, where the retreating ice is allowing for new trade lanes, is exposing different types of minerals, is exposing massive fisheries, and all kinds of other national security concerns to our border, to the criticality of the Panama Canal, where 70% of our shipping flows, that's trading with Asia, and all the way down. So it's really about reasserting that leadership in many ways, and that will be diplomatically, militarily, and certainly economically. I think what you'll see in the next year are a number of trade agreements that are, kind of spawning and out of these new diplomatic agreements. And importantly, you've seen from Chile to Argentina to Bolivia, Venezuela now, although obviously we're happy to talk about that, and Honduras, countries that were, and when I say left-leaning, not on the kind of Republican or Democrat, more on kind of the spectrum of socialism to free markets and kind of the values that we all share, moving back our way politically, and I think we'll see the economics and the military relationships follow.
Let's pull on the diplomatic thread. There's a lot we
Yeah.
could dig into in that answer, but let's pull on the diplomatic thread as it pertains to your current job. Right after you were confirmed, you did a talk in which you talked about the tremendous potential of the UN and that it plays a key role in so many things that we're trying to do. The president has been fairly critical of the UN over the years, and certainly since the start of this administration. So I'd love to hear how you and the administration view the role of the United Nations in accomplishing America's foreign policy objectives.
Yeah. Well, he's been critical, but he's also said there's tremendous potential. And my charge from him is to help us realize that potential. So just a few statistics to throw at you. The UN's budget has quadrupled in the last 25 years. 4x. I don't think we've seen, not doubled, not tripled, quadrupled. I don't think we've seen a fourfold increase in peace around the world. In fact, it's gone the opposite direction in terms of an increasingly fracturing world. Every country that we talk to, aligned with the United States, not aligned with the United States, pounds the table about UN reform, but it never seems to happen. The UN has launched a reform initiative on average every year and a half for the last 20 years. And what is it really resulted in? And so our kind of approach is let's bring it back to basics. It was established post-World War II to make sure we never had a World War III with nuclear weapons. Then, if you think about the world in the 40s and the 50s as nuclear weapons were kind of evolving on the scene, and that global arms race. And, if you look at, and this is the president's frustration, like, okay, Ukraine, the largest land war in Europe since World War II that has broken out, that's going to take real American leadership to bring that, and heavy involvement to bring that to some type of just and responsible conclusion. But things like a border dispute between Thailand and Cambodia over Buddhist temples, why is it the UN in there? The ongoing atrocities that are going on in Sudan, a 50-year conflict that, frankly, the world's forgotten about in Western Sahara and Morocco. There are a number of these conflicts that have literally just been sitting. And his question and mine is, how do we get the UN re-engaged in resolving wars, preventing wars, and keeping the peace? There have been peacekeeping operations that have been ongoing now for 70 years. Some point, you should work yourself out of a job. And so we are on these peacekeeping missions. There's 90,000 peacekeepers in 12 conflicts around the world. We're tying them to a political process that will actually bring some political resolution so that, I don't know, maybe we can move the 11,000 peacekeepers out of DRC Congo. We had the Washington Accords here under President Trump. We had Azerbaijan and Armenia, a 30-year conflict that he is now bringing, I think, to a responsible peace. So it's too often in government, the priority in international government is espoused by how much money and people you're throwing at the problem. We're saying where have the results been and asking those tough questions. I know it's a lot of tough love, and I'll stop with this so you can ask another one. Look, I was just out at the Munich Security Conference. It's a big European conference. There's a lot of questions about NATO. I know there might be some tough tweets and some tough love. But 10 years ago, only 7 out of 30 NATO nations were contributing the bare minimum to their defense. Now it's 30 out of 30. And not only are they contributing the minimum, there's a whole new slew that's looking to double their defense spending so that they can, we could talk about Ukraine, Russia, the threat from Russia, what have you, but Europe has got to be able to stand up on its own and defend itself. And it's only been through we could be friends and allies and have tough conversations. We're not getting a divorce. And it'll be okay.
So that's a great segue to my next question, because I think to a lot of the world, they wonder if it's going to be okay.
Yeah.
right? They see the United States giving what you'd call tough love to the UN, to NATO, pulling out of, what is it, more than 60 international organizations, wondering whether or not, one, they can rely on the United States to be that superpower partner of theirs, and two, it raises the question about what the future of multilateralism looks like at all. Yeah. And I wonder what you'd say to those people who are a little nervous.
Yeah, look, well, I think you have to look at the same time, what the world that we inherited at the end of 2024, largest land war in Europe, the war in Gaza seemingly unending, hostages literally by the dozens held in these god-awful tunnels being forced to dig their own graves, the humanitarian aid being caught up in the war, regardless of what you think in terms of absolutely we're a nation of immigrants, but no nation can survive the 20 million that flowed across our southern border. 40%, according to Doctors Without Borders, of the women and girls involved are sold into trafficking or sex slavery. I mean, I can go down and down the list, right? So where are we now? Well, we have a, not perfect, but a sustained ceasefire in Gaza that so many students, so many people around the world were demanding. Every single hostage released, both alive and deceased. The aid that is flowing into Gaza has exceeded the UN's own minimums now every week since the ceasefire last October. No, we don't have Ukraine resolved yet, but at least the two sides are talking. A peace process in place for DRC Congo that's been going on for 30 years. The Azerbaijan-Armenia, which was about to go to yet another conflict, also on a peace process. The country of Panama, the first Latin American country to reject and unsign itself from China's Belt and Road Initiative for the first time in decades. So I know we get really wrapped around the rhetoric and the tactics, but I would just really ask everyone to take a breath and focus on the results. And many of these things are on a better trajectory. And just to take it to the issue of the day that's been dominating the news, I can say unequivocally that Iran, we've seen what they're doing with missiles and drones. If they had a nuke, you have to keep in mind that Saudi Arabia, probably the UAE, probably Turkey, and others would want their own nuclear programs as well to defend themselves. And now we have a Middle East awash in a nuclear arms race. So you have to look at what also has been prevented. And it's a tough world, and sometimes that takes truly tough measures. But I don't think we could argue, I mean, we went into talks with Iran last year, we went into talks earlier this year, and just this last weekend. But diplomacy has to be, credible diplomacy sometimes has to be backed by force.
All right, I may circle back to a couple of things you said there, because there's a
To
lot.
answer finally your questions on the multilateral space, of course. I mean, I thought Secretary Rubio's speech at Munich, I'd encourage everybody to look at it. We are trying to make these organizations better. The UN is on an absolutely unsustainable financial path. Its budget just keeps ballooning and ballooning. Do you know who pays it? The United States pays more than 180 countries combined. The last time we had real reform is 1999, when Senator Jesse Helms and then Senator Joe Biden withheld our funding and said, we mean it this time. Until we see these reforms, we're not going to continue to put your tax dollars down that hole.
Okay, since you brought up the Middle East, let's go there next. I saw you were at State today. You were at the State Department for those.
And to add to that long list, the first direct talks between Lebanon and Israel in modern memory.
And you were there today. The U.S. is enforcing a naval blockade of Iranian ports. Iran has rejected our most recent, in the most recent ceasefire talks, our proposal on suspension of nuclear activity for 20 years. There are a lot of warnings about a possible global recession as a result to what's happening there. Where does this end? and how should we define success when it does?
Yeah. The president has said, both on our military objectives and our broader objectives, we cannot, and that's not just the United States, it is UN Security Council resolution after resolution going back 21 years, actually even further. So that's the entire world community saying, we agree Iran cannot and should not have a nuclear weapon. So that is both on the enrichment side and on the highly enriched uranium that they already had, which was, there is no country in the world that enriches uranium to 60% that doesn't then have a nuclear program, because there's no need for a civilian program to enrich that much, that far. So it's a highly enriched uranium, it's their enrichment program, it's their ongoing, they're not a state sponsor of terrorism, they are the leading state sponsor of terrorism all over the world across multiple Republican and Democrat administrations. So it's their ongoing support for terrorism. And of course, we have to have open sea lanes. And the president's action, as part of the ceasefire, Iran had agreed to stop attacking international shipping. Instead, they're trying to decide who the winners and losers are in the global economy. We can't have a world where a party in a dispute or even a party in a conflict punishes the whole rest of the world as part of that conflict. You can't have two countries shut down the Straits of Gibraltar or the Bering Straits or the Malaccan Straits or any or others, and free and open shipping that makes all of our economies go is a fundamental piece. So what he's decided is, look, Iran, until you open it all and there's shipping for all, we're not going to let your ships go out.
So the Security Council voted on a resolution, right, the Hormuz resolution, which was vetoed by Russia and China. And you said afterwards that their veto does not restrict the United States to continue to act in its own self-defense. So I guess my direct question is, do we need the Security Council?
We do. Here's why, and this is what is interesting. For many countries, so for example, the president's 20-point peace plan that world leaders from all over the world, Europe, Arabs, Muslim majority nations, the Palestinian Authority, all came to Sharm el-Sheikh and said, we agree this is the 20-point peace plan for Gaza. Many of those countries to then contribute troops as part of an international stabilization force or a peacekeeping force needs the authorization within their own systems, their constitutions and their domestic law from the UN Security Council, which for all of its flaws is the widely agreed upon entity that can set anything that we pass out of the UN Security Council is binding in international law. And so for Indonesia to contribute troops or Azerbaijan or Italy, they needed that kind of stamp from the UN. And case in point, think of it this way. We have this debate here between the executive branch and the legislative branch on the authorization of the use of force. For many of these countries, the UN is that authorization. So if the UAE says, you know what, we are starving as a country, and the Saudis say you cannot shut down our straits, Iran, in order to take military action, they want that blessing from the international community. Now, our lawyers have taken a different approach. I know where you're going with that. We have invoked Article 51 of the UN Charter, which allows you to defend under the guise, without getting into the legalese, of self-defense. That's what we've invoked. That will be debated by international lawyers right here at your law school for quite some time, but that's from an international standpoint, what we're acting under.
Well, I was going to actually pull on a different thread there. You drew the parallel to Congress and authorization of the use of force. Congress didn't authorize the use of force in this case. Should it? Should it have been consulted and given that before we went in?
So
as a former member of Congress,
both Republican and you're speaking to a much larger constitutional debate, but every Republican and Democratic administration has deemed the War Powers Act as unconstitutional. That said, we feel like, and certainly Secretary Rubio has been there almost every week, that we have sufficiently briefed Congress. They were given sufficient notice. There's precedent in terms of briefing what we call the Gang of Eight, the leadership of the Congress and the relevant committees. All of that has been done, and that we've treated appropriately. There will be war powers resolutions. The last 3 were actually voted down by the Congress. We'll see. They'll probably make another attempt this week, but this isn't new to this conflict, right? This same debate happened when the Obama administration took down Gaddafi in Libya in 2011, did not go for war powers or any type of authorization. So this is an ongoing debate our entire history.
Let's broaden it out a little bit to the region. Hezbollah responded to today's talks by launching rockets at Israel. That is still a very hot conflict between those two, despite the talks. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza is still pretty staggering.
Sure.
And now with the conflict in Iran, what is the administration's vision for the future of the region?
Well, I would go back to President Trump's first overseas trip, which was to Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Qatar. And what really led that trip was commercial diplomacy. Over $1.4 trillion that was promised to be invested into the United States, and a number of ongoing, everything from a bilateral relationship, everything from dedicating the, a new species of leopards to the Smithsonian Museum here, to our space programs, where the Emiratis have a space program, to a whole slew of agreements when it comes to technology and data. And really the underlying premise is an expansion of the Abraham Accords, which I think was the seminal achievement of the first Trump administration. And what kind of underscored that for many, many years. And I could, if I took time and did the research, pull you expert after expert after expert. Many of them, no offense, Georgetown alums and George Washington alums and experts in think tanks that said you can never make any progress in resolving the conflicts between the Arabs and Israelis until you resolve the conflicts with the Palestinians and the Israelis, right? And administration after administration, they ran into that wall. What the first Trump administration did was turn that on its head and said, wait a minute, let's set that aside, because what all of these Arab countries and the Israelis are most afraid of right now is Iran and its hegemonic aspirations, support of terrorism, destabilizing activities. And what they want to do is work together commercially. And that worked with the 6 countries signing up, and it was the first 6 in 30 years that had signed on with the Israelis. We have a number of others that are ready, but for resolving this issue in Gaza, and getting that on a better trajectory. It may or may not work, folks, but here were our options, and this is what I said to the Security Council. You either have Hamas ruling Gaza, and it doesn't get out, but it is horrific. They are executing people in the streets, and it is the worst kind of ISIS terrorist organization. You have the IDF occupying, or we have some type of international coalition, in this case, with a new Palestinian administration that the PA has bought onto and an international stabilization force. Let's try something new, because what we've tried for so many years hasn't worked. And I guess just to wrap that up, the more people in this region are talking about data centers and ports and a new rail project that will go basically from the UAE through Saudi, through Israel, and up through Turkey. And business binds people. People want a better life for their kids. And the more they're talking about that, the less they're talking about my grandfather's, great-grandfather's, great-grandfather's beef, or tribal issue, or what have you, going back many, many generations. So it's a very looking forward approach. It worked in the first Trump administration, and I think if we can clear up these issues and keep Iran on its back foot. Look, Lebanon is in a much better place, much better than it was. Syria has a real chance. Iraq is in a much better place. There is no country out there, and I said this to the Iranian ambassador, point to me a country that is better off because of the engagement, the destabilizing terrorism of the Iranian regime. They're all worse off. So once we, I think, get that issue and that core issue to a far better place. You are going to see a Middle East. If you look at what's going on in Jeddah, in Dubai, in Manama, in Kuwait City, that can really kind of explode on the world stage in a really positive way.
We can go so much deeper into the region, and I have no doubt our students that at least a few of them will likely want to. But I want to ask two questions before we invite them into the question. One, I want to pivot to China real quick. And you've been very vocal on China throughout your career. China, today the foreign minister called the blockade dangerous and is trying to position Beijing as the voice of reason. It's not the first time that China has tried to step up its soft power, right? We saw how engaged they were back during COVID. And you've said that the competition with China at the UN is absolutely critical. I guess I would love to hear your thoughts on that sort of jockeying for influence between the United States and China right now, and where our challenges and opportunities are there.
Yeah, look, I heard the foreign minister's statement, Foreign Minister Wang Yi. We always have to look at the rhetoric and the reality is what has happened in the South China Sea, literally taking beautiful, environmentally sensitive coral reefs and turning them into full-blown military bases and runways in violation of all kinds of issues. What's going on in the Philippine Sea, what's going on with illegal fishing, which is, I just convened a group of Pacific Islanders, and when you have 300 to 400, like just by comparison, that's larger than the entire U.S. Navy, but a single fishing fleet of 300 to 400 ships that just strip mines the ocean, and these poor Pacific Islanders are left without a livelihood. So there's a lot of maritime issues that I would push back on that rhetoric when you look at the actual reality. And then in terms of competition, yeah, look, I mean, this is our vision of the world. These are our values in terms of freedom of assembly, freedom of press, freedom of religion, that we want to espouse on the world stage. And the entire world stage is right up there in New York at the UN. Where are there opportunities? China is now the second largest contributor behind the United States, the first largest, and they're not very happy that the UN bureaucracy has bloated. They agree that regardless of where you are on the climate debate, you don't need 7 UN agencies with its own headquarters and own staff and own administrators and boards. There are so many efficiencies. And where does that really matter in the humanitarian aid space and the development aid space? That's more of every dollar. Or international, euro or what have you, that's going to people in need and not filtering through all of these headquarters. So they were with us when we called to cut 3,000 headquarters bureaucrats out of the UN in New York and empower the field and push that money out to people who need it.
But I guess what I struggle with on this, and I'd love you to tell me your perspective, China is certainly trying to step up its role as a soft power, humanitarian aid around the world. During COVID, they gave out their vaccines left and right. And at a time when the United States eliminates USAID, has slashed quite a bit of our humanitarian efforts, and the UN as well, China seems to be trying to fill that void in order to build its influence around the world. How do we ensure that doesn't happen?
Let me unpack that just for a moment, because I know there's a lot out there in the media and what have you. USAID was merged into the State Department. There's an entire humanitarian bureau now that has done that. You know who else has done that? The United Kingdom did that 7-8 years ago. Australia has done that as well. I just sat with the deputy director, she's an American, of UN AIDS, She said, thank you. She said, I can't tell you how many times I was sitting with a whole team of USAID people and they were saying something totally opposite of what the State Department people were saying. So part of this was getting it aligned and getting it refocused. Yes, we're $39 trillion in debt. And I can tell you as a former congressman, when I go home to say we should be fixing schools over there when their schools aren't in great shape in Daytona or Detroit or wherever, it's always a tough conversation. It's their money. And they ask tough conversations, where's it going? I can tell you as a Green Beret and all over in Africa, can't tell you how many times I went to a school that was built by USAID. The teachers were funded by the UN. Nobody funded the school supplies or the generators, or the local government couldn't afford the electricity, and you literally had a school with goats in it. And so it's about making it more coherent, more focused, and more effective, and prioritizing places where we have a direct national interest. We just can't afford to be everything to everybody anymore. And other countries are making those same decisions. Back to the point on the competition. For example, there's a World Intellectual Property Organization, out of Geneva. We want someone who views intellectual property rights for our entrepreneurs and businesses that go overseas the way we do, not the way China does. These positions are elected, these leadership positions are elected, and we are aggressively running our people. Or like-minded, there's a Singaporean businessman that now is heading that. So if any of you guys want to work in those organizations when you're done with the School of Foreign Service, please let us know, because we want Americans. Look, we have all kinds of divides in this country. We may disagree on all kinds of things, but I tell you, I would encourage every one of you to travel. And I can't tell you how many people, when I talk to them, they come back and they kiss the ground for the United States of America when they come back home.
You just invited a bunch of them to hand you resumes
Good.
at the end of this event.
Good.
I just want to make sure you're ready.
It's a two-way thing, man.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Two standing mics. I invite you all to start lining up there while I ask my final question of this portion of the conversation. And this goes back to a theme you've brought up a couple times, which is about rhetoric. You're at Georgetown, nation's oldest Catholic university, rooted in a Jesuit tradition that emphasizes human dignity and interfaith dialogue and service to others. This public spat between the president and the Pope, the comments about ending a civilization, the comments that have offended many people of the Muslim faith. You're the person that then has to walk into the Security Council or the General Assembly to build the coalitions with many of the countries that are sort of on the receiving end of the president's comments. How do you approach that, right? How do you find it is causing any challenges as you try to build these coalitions, or are they just viewing it as rhetoric, as you suggested earlier?
Yeah, look, by the way, St. Augustine, where I'm from, has the country's oldest Catholic church. So I deeply respect both Georgetown and the Jesuits and the entire tradition. I'm going to leave individual tweets to the president and the team. I can tell you, or you just mentioned, offending some of the Muslim faith. Our biggest allies right now are the Gulf Arab countries. They have said, look, if what they're doing to us, launching drones and missiles into our neighborhoods, is what they're doing with that, imagine what they would do with a nuclear weapon. We have to. The biggest thing they're saying right now, the president, is we have to finish this and we have to win. And so people understand truly the stakes, number one. Number two, they say, yeah, it's going to take a lot more than some mean tweets to get this Iranian genocidal regime that just, you know how many machine gun bullets it takes to massacre 20 to 40,000 people in a period of a week? It was horrific. And because of the internet blackout, the world is not seeing it. So it's going to take some tough language with these guys. And what happened in the 48 hours after that tough tweet, they came to the table. And we had a ceasefire. And those conversations are now ongoing. So diplomacy has a chance again. Sometimes it takes some tough rhetoric and some tough language. And then I'll tell you, look, from Venezuela to Cuba, I can walk around the world. The amount of texts, you said, how do I approach it? The amount of incoming I get from the Iranian people, the Venezuelan people, the Cuban people, I keep going, that say, thank you, please keep going. We want to see a free Havana, a free Caracas, a free Tehran by the end of his term. And these are brutal, brutal dictatorships that almost as a sport, torture and arrest and extrajudicially kill their own people. And so when I talk to my former constituents in Florida, they're, thank God, with tears of joy, thank God that brutal dictator Maduro is finally seeing justice. They can only hope how many Cuban Americans that can see not yet another generation getting imprisoned by the Castro regime. So we have to be real wide-eyed about what we're dealing with. And you know what, if we have a couple of mean tweets to free those people, so be it.
Let's go to the audience questions. When I point to you, please tell us who you are, where you're from, what you're studying. Please try, I ask, to keep your question on point, and please frame it in the form of a question. Let's start over here.
Ambassador, thank you so much for being here. My name's Leo. I'm from Chicago, Illinois, and I'm a junior studying government.
Hi, Leo.
I would love to talk a little bit about the UN's involvement in the Middle East. First, Trump's 20-point peace plan and Security Council Resolution 2803 talked about a Palestinian path to statehood and a reform of the PA, yet we've not seen any appetite from the US to pressure Israel into monitoring settler violence or any conditions there, or stepping on the neck of the PA. And I'm curious, with Trump's position as a peacemaker and the unique political capital that he has over not only the Israeli population, he's immensely popular there, but also their government as well, why there's not been a push, even as the UN has really strengthened their push for Palestinian statehood to impose upon the Israelis. And then also I'm curious, with the Strait of Hormuz, if the US is considering working with the UN as the Secretariat's talked about a new Black Sea grain initiative for the Strait of Hormuz, and why the US is reluctant to engage there.
So I'll take the questions in reverse. It was actually the Iranians who rejected the UN in that regard, not the United States, because the Iranians' foreign minister came out and said, we've now decided that the Strait of Hormuz is our waters. That was quite a shock to all the Gulf Arabs and the entire, everyone in Asia who needs the free flow of goods. So it was the Iranians who rejected that initiative. And look, on the two-state piece, read through the 20-point peace plan. The reason we were able to get the PA to buy into this, Abu Mazen actually came to Sharm el-Sheikh and shook the president's hand, and keep a very tough, in the Israeli spectrum, right-leaning Israeli coalition, all on sides on this, set aside the ongoing decades-long debate over West Bank, Judea-Samaria, and what have you, was because in that plan, which now in the UN is stamped in international law, there is a pathway with reforms to a two-state solution, and, which the United States led this administration led it, said no annexation, no occupation. First time ever. The president very clearly has said no annexation. And then final thing, look, after the Israelis struck downtown Doha, Qatar, and I said, man, this could really escalate. It was President Trump that had Prime Minister Netanyahu in the Oval Office and sat there as Prime Minister Netanyahu called the countries, there's no love lost there, and apologized. So it is not easy. But those two things are now part of his plan, and that we just opened, to your point, we just opened a liaison office with this new Palestinian group. It's called the NCAG, the National Committee for the Administration of Gaza, to the PA. Remember, it was Hamas who ejected the PA. It was Hamas who attacked the Palestinian Authority and took over Gaza and spent 15 years building tunnels and a war infrastructure rather than a better future. So they are on board with us that Hamas has to go. That's the next big step before we can get to those reforms and get back on a pathway. And then once we are there, I think you'll see an expansion of the Abraham Accords and that brighter Middle East that we talked about.
Thanks for the question. Let's go over here.
Thank you for being here, and thank you for your service. My name is Arad. I'm Indian, but I was born and raised in Indonesia. Just wanted to,
Where?
I was born and raised in Indonesia.
Oh.
And I'm a freshman in the School of Foreign Service. I wanted to ask, in terms of the U.S. relations with India, how do you see that progressing in the next few years, considering India's semi-friendly relations with Russia, but similar interests in countering China and peace in the Middle East? Just wanted you to touch on that.
Yeah, look, I was the co-chair in the House of Representatives of the U.S.-India caucus, and I think it's an incredibly consequential relationship. It's the world's oldest democracy with the world's largest democracy. If you look at their demographics, their population is growing. China, South Korea, Japan, Europe, they're all declining, which is going to present them huge economic issues over the next 20 to 30 years. We've had our bumps in the road in our relationships, our ups and downs. The relationship with Russia is a legacy from the Cold War. It's also geographical proximity. It's also their energy needs that they've had a hard time replacing. Look, I'm not apologizing or making excuses. I'm just trying to explain the dynamic. I believe the Prime Minister Modi and the President are either scheduled for a call or just had one. We know how important the relationship is. I hope to see a bilateral trade deal. I hope to see continued defense cooperation. It's an incredibly important relationship going forward. And as someone who's been in 2 3-day-long Indian weddings, there's a great Indian American community in North Florida. The ties that really bind the country are really important. And then you look at, oh my gosh, the engineers, the education that's coming out. I think it's 6 out of 7 out of our 7 largest tech firms are all Indian Americans. It's across the board a hugely consequential relationship that I think you'll see the administration stay focused on.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Good evening, Mr. Ambassador. My name is Abdullah Nasif. I'm from Egypt, and I'm doing the Arab Studies program under the SFS. And you were in the room today during the first meeting between the Lebanese ambassador and the Israeli ambassador at the State Department. So will we soon be seeing a ceasefire in Lebanon, as well as seeing a pullout of the IDF from southern Lebanon soon?
Well, I can't and shouldn't get ahead of those conversations. We can't negotiate in public. But the fact, look, here's one of the things. When I was in the military and I used to deal with our foreign service officers and State Department, what have you, the military is very objective focused. And I would go to these meetings with our State Department colleagues, and a lot of talking, a lot of paper and preparation. Like, what is the point of this meeting? That's the mentality in business, too. What I've learned as a diplomat, sometimes just having the meeting is a huge accomplishment. Sometimes getting all sides in the room that, for their own domestic reasons or historic reasons, wouldn't even sit together is a huge first accomplishment. I cannot understate what a big deal that was that happened today. That I think we have a tremendous opportunity in Lebanon with President Aoun, a former soldier, Prime Minister Berry, who's come a long way. But complementing that question on the IDF is, when will we see Hezbollah taken care of and disarmed once and for all? Remember, it was them that assassinated a former prime minister of Lebanon who dared turn against them. And so that's what a lot of the discussion, I can't get into details, focused on. Today you have a prime opportunity. Iran's on its back foot. Syria, which is the genocidal, brutal Assad regime, is gone. You have a new government in Lebanon, and how can they come together? Just final point, when the October 7th, 23, when all of that kicked off and Hezbollah started rocketing northern Israel and they had to displace 90,000 people, that would be the equivalent if the United States had to displace 3 million people here because they were getting rocketed over their borders. And we took tough action after 9/11. I think it's absolutely reasonable and Israel's right to defend itself. But we have to get to a place where the Lebanese legitimate government and army, which just declared for the first time publicly that they want to disarm and demilitarize Hezbollah and take their country back. And that's what we're very much focused on.
And did they both agree to have another meeting following today's meeting?
I can't get into it, but signs are good.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But good effort.
Yeah.
Okay, over here.
Hi, I'm Benny. I'm a senior in the School of Foreign Service. Roughly this time last year, you accidentally added a journalist into a Signal group chat.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that was a mistake, and people make mistakes, and I'm sure that the news cycle was far from fun for you. And so I'm curious, what have you learned from that experience, and how has the communication of senior administration officials changed from that experience, especially with strikes being discussed on Iran at this moment?
Yeah. Well, first, encrypted apps were not only authorized, they were encouraged by the Biden administration, mainly because there was a penetration of all of our telecommunications by Chinese cyber actors. Across the board. It's called Volt Typhoon, look it up. And so they encourage encrypted apps. That was absolutely authorized. You're absolutely right. People make mistakes and move forward. And the mission was highly, highly successful. What we had not done previously with the Houthis was actually go after their leadership, and we successfully did. And you don't see the Houthis getting engaged right now in this ongoing conflict. So look, we have to move at the speed of relevance. We have to communicate, and if you look at my portion of that, basically I was telling everyone, hey everyone, you've got some instructions from the president on another system.
That makes sense, thank you. And have you learned anything from that experience?
Yeah, be careful when you look at these chat groups.
Thanks for the question. Over here.
Ambassador Waltz, thank you so much for being here. I'm Isabella, and thank you also, Dr. Nishawat, for your time with us this semester. It's an honor to have you both. I wanted to ask a little more about how you've seen your own personal values and your faith play out in your career, and how you approach these foreign policy discussions, and also any advice you have for us as we're starting to discern how we can best be of service to the world.
Yeah, well, thank you. I mean, I'm a Christian and proud of it. And one of the things that this administration has really made a centerpiece is religious freedom. I got to be honest with you, I did not have Nicki Minaj on my dance card when I went to the UN. Turns out her pastor is Nigerian. The Christian religion is the most persecuted religion around the world. And what's happening in places like Nigeria, but elsewhere, in the north mainly, is truly horrific. People are arrested under some of the local laws, literally for wearing a cross. But her perspective was all religions should be able and should have the right to worship freely in accordance with your own beliefs and with accordance with how you see your faith. I think that is fundamental to who we are as a free people. It's fundamental to our founding as a country, and to be in a place literally where every day, I mean, I'm dealing with people from all over the world, and all of those perspectives is a real honor. And I got to tell you, anytime I sit behind that placard that says United States of America, as a congressman, you have to represent all your constituents, even the ones who don't vote for you, even the ones who yell at you, at a meeting, and now to represent all Americans of all religions on the world stage, but in line with our values to impart through the UN, through these resolutions, that every other country should do the same thing. Not agree to one or the other, but have an open and fair society for everyone to worship. I think there is, frankly, no higher calling. Thanks.
Thank you.
Question.
Hello, Ambassador. Thank you very much for taking the time. My name is Franklin, and I am studying public policy at the McCourt School here in Georgetown. My question, I have a question regarding trust between the U.S. and Iran. It's clear that ever since, I think, almost 50 years, this regime in Iran has been in power, this theocracy, and they've been defined by anti-Americanism and chance of death to America, death to Israel. Do you think that that combined with the fact that in the past year, the U.S. has struck Iran twice when the countries were in the middle of negotiations, do you think that given this, it is possible for the U.S. and Iran to come to some sort of lasting deal that the two sides can find a way to trust each other?
That's a great question. And, you know, we can kind of talk in the generalities and ethereal, but when you're sitting across from, you know, from negotiators, it becomes very real and very personal. I'll tell you, this is a regime, because it just gets lost in frankly, the media coverage and what have you. This is a regime that just a few years ago, a young girl dared to not wear a hijab, and the morality police literally beat her to death. And that sparked a series of schoolgirls, mainly middle school and high school, protesting on the street. They were hung on the street to send a message. Her name was Masa Amini. This is a brutal dictatorial regime. So yes, that are responsible for hundreds, if not thousands, of the deaths of Americans that Julia and I both served with all over the world. So yeah, that's a lot to overcome in terms of trust, and that's why in any agreement you have to have inspections, you have to have verifications, you have to have enforceability. But I do think we can come to some type of agreement or deal, as the president calls them, because both sides have interest in getting there for very different reasons.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thanks. This will be the last question.
Hi, my name is Charlie. I'm from New York. I'm a sophomore studying government. You mentioned a couple questions back the Houthis and the success of our previous military operations. I'm curious, about 8 days ago, we saw them launch a missile against Israel and announce their intention to join this war. So where do you see the Houthis' military capabilities as currently standing, and how successful were the previous military operations?
Look, you saw that launch, but you haven't seen any since. You didn't see any before. We haven't seen them get engaged in a really forceful way, and you haven't seen the launches on Red Sea shipping like you did before. Without getting into a whole lot more detail, it's interesting. You watch these various groups really kind of pick if they think who's gonna win, who's going to prevail, and they're very, very kind of transactional at the end of the day when it comes to survival. That's one. And then number two, we can't lose sight of the fact that what we have sustained through the first administration, Trump administration, and now is maximum economic pressure. And when we hear these terrorist groups complaining that they don't have any cash, where are my plane loads of money from Iran, it's all dried up, that's a good thing, but I'll just leave it at that. Right. Thanks.
Ambassador, thank you so much. Thank you so much for coming. I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody's questions. For some reason, I thought we'd be able to answer all the world's questions in an hour. I guess we probably need a little bit more time. But I just want to thank you for taking your time. Julia, thank you so much for giving so much of yourself this semester as a fellow. And we hope to bring you back to continue the conversation.
Look, I thank you. I just did Model UN. I try to do every one of these groups that I possibly can. I mean, we do have a pretty intense day job. But I thank you be engaged. It's easy to talk the talk, walk the walk, find ways to serve. You don't have to wear a uniform to serve. You don't have to join government to serve. Serve your communities, serve your neighborhoods, find ways to volunteer, be servant leaders to the extent you can. There's no greater gift than giving back. And so we don't always get things right. We often get things wrong. Julia and I, we saw the policy drift through the Afghanistan and Iraq wars. A lot of the decisions were made right here in this town. I would just encourage you all to seek out, be part of the solution. Yelling at the television and throwing things and making snarky comments on posts on social media, that's easy. Actually rolling up your sleeves and trying to be solving some of these 1,000-year-old problems is really noble work. You don't have to do it your entire career, but I would encourage every one of you to find ways to serve. Yeah.
And on that note, thank you all.